Guys, welcome back to my kitchen. Today we are going to be making French bread. This French bread recipe is really simple, comes together really quickly, which for any busy person, I don't care who you are, is so nice, especially with bread. Oftentimes bread is a process, can take hours. This takes maybe an hour and a half. I haven't ever really timed it, but out of all of the bread recipes that I do right now, this comes together the fastest and is delicious. Has a really good counter life. And so it has been my go-to for, I don't know, months since I found it. So I've made it many, many times. And so I thought I would make a video for you guys and share the recipe. Now the recipe is from the Stay at Home Chef. And I will link it down below. I printed it off of the website. So the first thing we're going to do is I have my water warming up, and I'm just going to warm it up a little bit. I'm not going to warm it up very much. I want to make sure that it is between 100 and 110, which is what they call for on the recipe. And that's just to help the yeast bloom. I use active dry yeast. I do not use instant dry yeast. So I do have to give it that bloom time or that activation time. I also do a little dab of honey in my bowl. This just gives the yeast something to feed on. I probably do about a teaspoon. I don't measure it. It's probably a teaspoon and a half. I don't want my water to get too hot because I don't want to have to wait for it to cool down. Which I did make it too hot. But that's okay. So what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to finish just explaining what I was doing with the honey. The honey gives the yeast a little something to feed on. And I notice that it helps it bloom faster. She does, or they do, call for instant dry yeast, which I am not using, and they don't call for any kind of sugar for the yeast to feed on. The first time I made it, I didn't add the honey at first, and the yeast just kind of didn't do anything. So then I just added a little dab of honey, and it immediately started to bloom. So ever since then I've done that, but they do not call for that on the recipe. So you can take that or leave it whichever way you please. So what I'm going to do is I'm doubling this recipe. So I'm going to do 4 cups of water. I'm going to put a little bit in, and then I'm going to add some just room temperature water to help cool it down. Okay, so we added room temperature water. Let's see what the temperature is now. Now it's not warm enough. So we're going to dump a little bit out. Now you want to make sure that your water is at the right temperature, because if you don't have it warm enough, the yeast won't flourish. It won't be the right environment for the yeast to flourish. And if you do it too hot, you will kill your yeast. When you kill your yeast won't rise, which will give you a really flat loaf, really flat and dense. Okay, it's at 103 now. I'm gonna leave it at that. Actually, I'm gonna make it a little bit warmer. Only because I'm going to dump it into this cold or cool bowl, room temperature bowl. So it's gonna cool it down even more. So I'm gonna bring up the temperature just a little bit more. All right, that's better. We're at 109. All right, so we're gonna dump it in with our honey. Just gonna mix the honey in just a little bit. Actually gonna add just a touch more. And then before I add my yeast, I'm going to take the temperature again. We're at 106, which is good still. because I'm doubling it, I'm going to do 3 tablespoons of yeast. And then I'm going to whisk it. This whisking process helps kind of crack the exterior of the yeast, helps it activate a little bit quicker, and also just mixes it in and helps the whole process happen faster. Okay, so while we're waiting on that, I'm going to go ahead and spray my bowl. This is going to be my proofing bowl or my rising bowl. And so I'm going to spray it with, this is olive oil, but you really can use any oil that you like. And I'm going to put it on my oven. Now I have started my oven to 375, and so the surface of my oven is hot, so the bowl is going to heat up. So my goal is to keep the yeast in its happy place. I want to keep it in an environment that is warm and cozy for it. It helps it to rise, it helps it to bloom, it helps it do all of the things that we want yeast to do in order to give us a delicious loaf of bread. So that is my goal, is to babysit my yeast the best that I can throughout this whole process. So then as we wait on our yeast to bloom, which it is starting to get bubbly, it doesn't take very long. I am going to make sure I have my other ingredients. So the only other ingredients that I need are all-purpose flour and salt. So I have them out already because I got them out before I started recording. It just erupted. That was fun. I don't normally see that. So you guys missed the big event as far as the erupting goes, but you see how it's bubbly on the top? Especially right here, this is where it just erupted from. That is what we want. I'm going to wait just a little bit longer. I'm going to let it get bubbly kind of the whole way around. Over here still looks a little bit like it's just watery. So I'm just gonna give it just a little bit more time, and it shouldn't take very long. So it's totally your preference whether you do this now or closer to the next step after you rise it. I'm going to do it now because I have so much other stuff to do in the house. It just depends on how much kitchen space you have. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to prepare my baking pans. I'm going to put parchment paper over these, and this is where our final rise or proof and baking is going to happen. So I'm just going to prepare this now so I don't have to do it later. Again, this is not a necessary step at this point. If you're overwhelmed by all of the steps, don't worry about doing this now. You can do it a little bit closer to when you're actually going to need it. I'm also just going to give it just a light dusting of oil, and I'm going to put it off to the side. Because I'm doubling the recipe, I'm going to do this twice. Our yeast is looking really good. This bread also freezes and thaws beautifully. So it's really been my go-to recipe because of all of those things. Okay. So put those over there. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to measure out our flour. And this recipe calls for 4.5 to 5 cups of all-purpose flour. Now remember, we are doubling it, so we're going to need substantially more than that. Now, what I do is I add my flour for the texture that I want. I don't just add all of that flour and mix it. I will add about half of that flour, let it mix, let it combine, incorporate, and see how much more it needs. And then I add it as we go, until I get the texture of dough I know is going to give me the best loaf. So that is what I would recommend that you do. I don't know why it's different. I mean, these recipes, obviously, that they know that it works. But for me, this is just how I prefer to do it, because then I can control what the dough actually looks like. So if you add too much flour, there's really no undoing that. You're going to get a much denser, much drier loaf. So this is just what I would recommend. I am in no way an expert. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but this is just how my experience in lots and lots of bread making has given me that wisdom. I have added too much flour and had a dry loaf, and I wish I hadn't done that. So this is what I do. So we're just going to go ahead and add, I'm going to add a healthy amount. This is a 2/3 cup measure that came with my waffle maker, and it's just convenient to keep in there. So I've made this recipe so many times now that I just kind of can eyeball this. But by all means, if this is your first time making this recipe, follow the recipe. Add about 1/2 to 3/4 of the amount of flour that they call for. Mix it and then add little bits after that. So before I mix this, I'm going to go ahead and add my salt, which I believe is also 3 teaspoons. Yes. And I'm going to add it in on top of my flour, not into the liquid mixture. It doesn't really matter if you add it into the liquid mixture. Yeast and salt don't really super get along. Your salt will not kill your yeast, but I just prefer to do it that way. So then I'm going to go ahead and start it and let it mix, and then I'll show you a little bit more about what I was talking about with the texture as we go along. Plugging the mixer in would really help this process, so make sure that you do that. Because, you know, if you have an electric mixer, it needs electricity in order to do its job. Okay. There's still quite a bit of flour mashed up against this side of the bowl. You guys probably aren't able to see it very well. So I'm just going to let this mix for a little bit. And it's okay that it's super lumpy and just does not look like bread dough at all. That is perfectly normal and perfectly okay. I'm going to go ahead and add just a little bit more. There we go. Just going to add a little bit more because it will help it firm up and get that flour off of the side. This mixes. I'm going to go ahead and crack my egg for my egg wash. I'm going to get that ready. Once again, this is something that I am choosing to do now so that I don't have to do it later. You can absolutely do it later. If you don't have the kitchen space or you just don't have the energy, whatever it is, it's okay not to do it now. I am just choosing to do it now so that I can have it all ready. I can go and do other things and then not have to do it right before I have to do the next step. So that's what I'm going to do now. As you make these recipes more and more, you will get more and more accustomed to seeing what the dough looks like in different stages, and you'll know how much to add, which will make the process a little bit quicker for you. But the very first time that I made this recipe, I think I started at might have been like 3:30 in the afternoon, and I had it on the table by dinner time by like 6 o'clock. That was excellent to me. Because my other recipes take at least 3 hours to make, and so that was really rewarding. I was really happy about that, and it is so delicious. I want to make little breakfast sandwiches with it so that we can all just pull them out of the freezer. My kids are getting a little bit older, And so it's nice for them to have a little bit of autonomy from me and be able to get their own food. And so I really want to offer them those options and not have to come to me and say, I'm hungry, can you give me something to eat, etc. So I am really looking forward to doing that. The last time I made this recipe, I did do like a tester run of those little sandwiches, and they loved them, and they did really well in the refrigerator. I have one right now in the freezer that I haven't tested the thaw of, which I need to do, but I'm really looking forward to using this recipe for that. It makes really yummy French bread. It makes delicious grilled cheese sandwiches, and so it's just a really good, versatile loaf. I do the like the traditional French bread loaf, so, you know, like long and skinny. I have been wanting to see how it would do in a loaf pan. You know what? Maybe we'll do that together. I think I will. I think I'll do that with you guys and see how it turns out, and see what the density and stuff like that, the crumb of the bread looks like in a loaf pan versus the traditional French loaf. So here, I'm gonna grab you guys and so you can see what it looks like. So this is what it's looking like right now. So you can see it's a little bit more together. It's holding together a little bit more, but it is still much too loose and watery, liquidy, slimy. So we're going to, now I have a suspicion that there is still flour that's stuck underneath the surface over here, so I'm going to take that into consideration in my measurements. And what I'm looking for with this dough is that it's coming away from the side of the bowl. Now this does not count because I just floured it, so the flour is all around the edge of the bowl. And so of course it's going to separate from the edge of the bowl just because the flour makes it not a sticky surface. So I have to wait until it's all incorporated and then see if it comes away from the edge of the bowl. Now, I only just wait for it to come away from the edge of the bowl. I don't wait for it to be all a glob on the inside, because in my opinion that just makes it too dense and I don't like that type of loaf. So I do it until it's just separating from the bowl, and then I flour my surface, and then that little bit of flour gets added in, and makes the texture that I'm looking for. And I'll also show you a different technique to getting a really good texture as well, testing the texture. So you see how now it's starting to stick to the side of the bowl again? So I'm going to add just a little bit more. So this is looking a little bit better. A little bit closer, I should say, to how I need it to look. I'm going to let all of the flour mix in before I give it a test. I can still tell it's not quite there yet, but I'm going to show you the test so that you guys can see it. You can see the difference between now and whenever it is going to be done. So I'm going to turn it off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger. Now it needs to be dry and not with flour on it because that'll give you a wrong result. And I'm going to just touch the dough here. Now do you see how stretchy it still is and how much is still stuck to my finger? That is not ready yet. We need to add more flour. So this is starting to look better. I've added a little bit more flour. We're going to give it a test. So that's much better. That's exactly what I want. When I touch it, it just a little bit stays on my finger, but not a whole bunch. This might actually be just a touch too much flour, but it should be okay. Hey guys, as I'm editing this video, I'm realizing that either I lost some footage or I never pushed record. And so the footage that you're going to see after this little clip of me is me shaping it after it's done its first rise. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of context here. So once you've mixed it in the bowl, You're going to pour it out, you're going to dump it out onto a floured surface. Now, because I added just a touch too much flour in the mixing process, I added less flour on my countertop, because any flour that I put on the countertop is going to be incorporated into the dough. So I really want to be mindful of that. I want to add as little as I can, but I also want to add enough so that it doesn't stick to the countertop and make a big mess, and make it so that I cannot get that nice smooth surface on the top before putting it in the bowl for rising. So that's what I did in the footage that either didn't get recorded or got lost somewhere. And I might find it, you know, like a year from now, it'll pop up in my memories or something like that. So, yeah, that's it. So then in this next clip that you're going to be seeing, it's done its first rise. So I put it on in the nice bowl that I oiled. I put it in there after I kneaded it just a little bit on the counter after dumping it out of my bowl. I knead it just until it gets a nice smooth surface on the top, and then I plop it into my bowl, smooth surface up. I cover the bowl with a little bit of cling wrap. You can either do it with cling wrap, you can do it with a nice moist towel. It's really up to you. Some people use shower caps, or I know that they have actual bowl covers. You can use that as well. I do poke a couple holes in my cling wrap just to let the dough breathe just a little bit, but we want to make sure that we don't let the top of the dough scab over or crust over, because that inhibits the rise from happening. So it's really important that you do cover it with something, as well as I spritz it with a little bit of oil as well. So I spray it with a little bit of oil and then put the cling wrap over it. I set it on my stove top, which is nice and warm because my oven is going, and I put it on top of a little cork board, like hot mat, just so that it's not directly on the heat, because I don't want my yeast to get too hot and kill it. I just want it to be, once again, in its happy place. So this next clip is after that has happened. The dough has doubled in size, is looking nice and healthy and happy. And now to the next clip. All right, we are back, and we are going to shape our bread. So we're going to put just a little dusting of flour. Now the difference between, what we need to do with these is roll them out and then roll them up. So we're gonna get our rolling pin out. I did get that bread pan, although the challenge with this is that I don't know whether I'm gonna have enough room in my oven for both. We'll see. So if I put my finger in it, see how it keeps the indent? I probably overdid this one just a little bit, but it's okay. It's still gonna be delicious. What I mean by overdid it is overproof it, or let it rise too much. I don't really care as much about the crumb. If it tastes delicious and doesn't have gaping holes in it, I'm good with it. All right, so we're gonna try to do this in equal sizes. This one's just a little bit smaller. Okay. I'm gonna do the loaf first because the loaf is gonna take longer to rise. So I'm just going to give myself just a little bit more flour. It's gonna just be a little baby loaf. I'm gonna give it a little spritz. Put it right there. Now these are a bit harder because I have to roll them out first. I will be very honest. This process is one of my least favorite processes. I can never seem to get them in a square so that it's easiest to roll them up, but just keep swimming. or just keep trying. That's what I do. Last time I did it, for whatever reason, was terrible. And I don't even know why, but the dough was fighting me so much. I'm sorry if I'm bumping into you guys. But this time, it appears to be a good time. And I don't do it perfectly. But now I'm just going to roll it. And I'm doing it as tightly as I can without ripping it. I don't want to rip a hole in this. It is sticking a little bit. I should have used just a little bit more flour. That's okay. It might just not be as pretty on the top, but once again, as long as it tastes delicious, that is my main motivation for just about everything that I make. I do want it to be pretty, obviously. Everybody likes pretty, but the more important thing, in my opinion, is tasting good. All right, so then I'm just going to put it on my pan, and I'm going to try to get it as straight as I can, like that. And we're going to move on to the next one. Trying to use as little flour as I can because any flour that I put down will get incorporated into the dough and make it a little bit more dense. Now, normally I knead it a little bit, and I think that's why it's a little bit more difficult for me to get it to stay in the square, but it makes it a prettier loaf. So this time I'm just going to, maybe I'll do both and see how it turns out, and you guys can see the difference. That's what I'll do. So I think because the gluten structures aren't as springy when I don't knead it before I roll it out, I think that's probably why I'm having an easier time rolling it out than if I were to have kneaded this a little bit and made it a little bit more smooth. But honestly, a little bit uglier loaf might be worth less frustration for me. So that's just something that you guys are going to have to decide for yourself. And as I'm rolling it, I'm just kind of pulling the edges to try to make it so that it stays the same size, because if you can see here, it goes kind of a, so I just pull it out and roll it up like that. There are French bread pans that you can get that kind of cradle it and keep it in shape. I tried to get some and they did not work for me, although I think I got baguette pans, and so they just weren't big enough. And I just haven't really been interested to try again, just because it works just fine for me like this. So here they are. I'm gonna spray them. I'll give them a little spritz. And then I'm gonna put them over here in the warm environment for them. And I will end up covering that with saran wrap as well, but I wanna get this one done. So this one I'm going to knead so that we can see the difference and also experience Jenny's torture. So it's just a little bit smoother on the top, but you see how it's more springy? And I have learned that if you walk away and leave it for a minute, well, I don't even actually know how many minutes, it relaxes again, but I don't really have that time because the other ones are already rising. and I don't want to have to separate that time. I don't want to have to do different timings going in the oven. So do you see how this one just does not want to go into a square? All of you experts out there are probably watching this in pain. Sorry. Well, this one's not as smooth on the bottom, so we're gonna flip it over. I promised prettier. I don't know if this one's actually going to be prettier, but oh, it is a little bit smoother. Just a touch. All right. So then I'm also going to use cling wrap for this, and I just lay it over it. Like that. And I'm going to do the same thing with this. You see how these are already rising? This box of cling wrap has fought me since the day I brought it home. Probably doing it wrong. Okay. There we go. Not take them very long to rise. Maybe 15 minutes, so I just keep an eye on it. And then we'll score them and egg wash them and put them in the oven to cook. All right, guys, it is time to score and egg wash. So they're a little because of where I did the fold. So these might not be the prettiest thing, but once again, I believe that they will be delicious. I'm just trying to let the weight of the knife do a lot of this for me. Guys, I'm not exactly sure how long I roast this for. I will put it on the screen just based on the footage that I got, if I can figure that out, just so that you guys know. But just know that rise time can differ from place to place, from altitude. Like altitude can affect it. Temperature in your home can affect it. So, you know, today my home is pretty warm because I have the oven going, I'm doing a bunch of other things. So, you know, my home is more warm and it's raining outside, so it is kind of humid. So just keep that in mind, that not all rise times look the same. But I will do my best to put in a guesstimate of how long I roast these. All right, we're just gonna take the temperature. I'm looking for 195 to 200. Oh, I can already tell it's not done. We're at 185. Our loaf is done. That is not. It's been about 3 minutes. Good for that one. And that one. So I just let them cool right here on the pan, but I do need to bring that other one out to check it. This one is definitely prettier than the other two. This one's done too. All right, guys, here is our finished loaves. These guys went a little, but that's okay. They will be delicious. These are the ones that I did not knead first. This is the one that I did knead and then roll up. And this is our little loaf. I'm gonna let them cool just a little bit and then I'll be back to cut them to show you guys the inside.